Hello and welcome to the Voice of Dunn Books. I'm Adam Dunn. Today we are speaking with Chris Allen, author of the Intrepid series of thrillers. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam.
In the broad strokes from the Intrepid series, from the installments I have read, the books are really about the trifecta of military intelligence and law enforcement operations. In reading about your background, it
Yeah,
seems like you've lived all three. Can you explain?
yeah, yeah. Look, I've been very fortunate. I guess as a young guy, I was interested in so many things, and so when I sort of moved into the military side of things first, it was, to be honest, it was going to be military or law enforcement for me, and I was so keen to start that I'd applied for both the federal police and the military at the same time, and the military came up first of all things. And I quite happily went into the military here in Australia, and my career kind of took off from there. And at one point, about midway through, after about 7 years of my military career, I decided to step out for a while, and I joined our federal police then. And I was about 25, I think, and I felt like I needed to have that experience, and I was quite experienced at that point as a young army officer, and so I did. I stepped out and joined the federal police, and I did about 2 years without what we call the AFP, which is the equivalent of your FBI in the Drug Operations Division, and enjoyed the experience immensely. But then realised I was more of a soldier than a policeman, and so I returned to the military and continued my career um, in the military. And in the midst of my military career and airborne forces, I did a stint as an intelligence officer as well. So I guess that's where that capturing those three elements that I subsequently built into the Intrepid agents came from that experience.
It seems as though in recent decades there has been a blurring of the boundaries between military, law enforcement, and intelligence operations. Given your experience, when would you say that blurring of the boundaries began and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometime in the late 70s, during the 70s when there was the build-up of hijackings and so on, there was this skill set that was seen to be lacking both in the military quarter as well as in the law enforcement quarter about, well, how do we actually go and try and retrieve people in a hostage situation, for instance, without it just being a conventional military operation, which is not going to cut it. And so people like the Israelis and the British were really at the forefront of it, I must say, in developing those skills. And I think around that time, the American FBI were developing the hostage rescue team capability that is now one of the best in the world. And so you found those agencies, whether they be military or law enforcement, were vying for a position in that space. At what point do the skills of a conventional policeman or a conventional soldier need to meet? And from my point of view, it was in that area where it was about retrieving citizens, either on home soil or abroad. And so then that started to become, okay, well, the retrieving citizens from a hostage situation on home soil is really a police responsibility. And retrieving citizens that may be in danger abroad is a military role. And so then you see the different agencies in all the countries internationally start training together. And so then you start seeing that blurring of skill sets, capacity to resolve issues becomes quite grey because the particularly the law enforcement agencies, their skill sets have come up right to that point of almost the military standard for that kind of operation. And then it comes down to the ethos and the philosophy of the agencies. With a military agency, it's about resolving things where there will be and are anticipated to be casualties. From the police point of view, it's trying to resolve things with absolutely minimising the casualties. out. So I think on the intelligence side, it's what ties those things together. So the skill sets again that have been developed in the police and military to accommodate new types of operations and expectations of those agencies.
Certainly, with our intelligence agencies over here, there has been an increasing trend towards militarization. Although the intelligence agencies may be nominally civilian, they have developed paramilitary wings. And these wings often cherry pick military assets, usually from special operations forces. Uh, Now, that's an odd dynamic, and I wanted to ask you about that. Is it possible for a nominally civilian intelligence agency to simply pick and choose whatever military assets whenever and wherever they want?
Well, it's definitely possible, Adam. And as you said already, it goes on all the time. I have a view about that. I feel like if a government of any country has an expectation that they need to resolve a particular issue using a military capability, then that's a capability that best sits with the military. And the Americans, ourselves, and the Brits have got some of the finest special forces units in the world. And as you said before, it's usually those guys that get cherry-picked to come and work for the intelligence agencies. I feel like there's much more to be accomplished by having a capability to resolve something that is done by a team of people that have worked together for a long period of time, that have a particular outlook on resolving these things. I think when you start cherry-picking for those kinds of operations, there's a danger of it being a little bit too one step removed. So I think putting those capabilities into an intelligence agency, those military capabilities into an intelligence agency, really defeats the purpose of it being an intelligence agency.
Moving further along that thread, this creates a sort of this military intelligence hybrid, if you will, has certainly in recent decades, and especially with counter-terror operations, been pushing more and more into civilian law enforcement. That is certainly not confined to the US, it's not confined to the UK or the EU. That simply seems to be the new normal. Now, that military intelligence fist in the law enforcement glove operating on home soil, where do you see that leading?
I get concerned that we are tackling some of these contemporary problems with essentially old school approaches, and it doesn't always work. I feel like using the traditional format of undercover operations to infiltrate organisations, and that's very much a skill that's been derived from the military and military intelligence going way back to the turn of the last century. It has its place, but it's not the only answer. And I think there's a lot more to be accomplished in overcoming some of the threats that we face at the moment by collaboration rather than covert operations, collaboration with communities and so on, rather than it being a traditional undercover infiltration kind of approach. So it's got to be balanced.
It's very apparent in your Intrepid series that there is a rivalry, a competition, let's call it unhealthy competition between the agencies themselves. Sometimes, now it can be through proxy conflicts, as you've written about, or it can be through outright lethal hostilities. And given your background, it seems like you may have seen this sort of thing happen in actuality more than once. How often does this kind of interagency skirmishing happen, and what forms does it take?
Yeah, look, I've seen all too often that it really comes down to individual egos at the core of all of it. And over time, the egos that people, that evolve in people that become a part of an agency, their identity is wrapped up in that agency, and they'll protect the reputation or the mystique of an agency at all costs. And that at all cost element is really ends up spilling over into wasted effort between government agencies that really should all be pulling in the same direction. But it's all about vying for who has a primacy over a particular activity and so on. And it's wasteful and pointless. It happens all the time. And again, as I said, it's driven largely by egos.
Also, what is readily apparent in your books is an increased hostility between government and business interests. Now, that's a very old, some would say time-honored dynamic. What do you see fueling that animosity here and now in the 21st century, in our time?
I think commercial interests inevitably, and it's as you said before, it's an old issue, but have far too much influence over our elected officials in any country. And so inevitably, what becomes national policy for a country will be significantly influenced by major commercial interests that aren't necessarily in the national interest. And when I talk about the national interest, I talk about the interest of the community rather than the perception of this is in the national interest that can be a bit of a throwaway and a cliche. So I have some strong views about the integrity behind some of these processes, and it really starts at the point where people are going into public life to represent the community and how they're getting there. And I'm sure that you're very familiar in your own country about these issues and how politicians are influenced. I think it's tragic. I think there's far too much influence of it. And too often, the interests of the community and the populace play second place to commercial interests of major organisations influencing government.
You started out as a self-published author before you were picked up for wide distribution. How have your books allowed you to articulate your views? Has becoming a published writer really strengthened your voice at all? Have you widened the reach to express your views through your writing?
Yeah, look, that's a good point. I appreciate you asking that, Adam. Since being published, I've really taken the opportunity to convey my views about, a variety of topics within the frame and the construct of thrillers, action thrillers. And so I feel like I've got myself to a point where I've achieved a good balance of getting some messages across that are important to me, while not weighing down the pace of the story or the action or the excitement of the story, because what I'm trying to do is entertain, but at the same time, it's important to me to be able to convey my views on a number of issues, and I feel like I've managed to do that in the books, and I'll continue to do that. And in fact, one of the new project I'm working on at the moment is a new series of thrillers where I have created the character, the new protagonist, is a guy of my age now. So I'm 50, and Alex Morgan in my Intrepid series is 35. So he's a guy very much at the height of his military prowess and his experience, and I enjoy writing about Alex in the Intrepid series. But now I've decided that I want to convey the point of view of a guy that's 15 years down the track from that.
And we are out. Chris, thank you so very much for doing this. Cannot wait to read the news. I'm really, really glad we got that segment. And as soon as you have titles, dates, anything, please reach out, let me know so we can start plugging those over here for you.
Thank you very much, Adam. And I wanted to thank you too while we're off for your books. So I'm really looking forward to reading them. I received them. I've got them right here to read, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, glad you got them safe, and happy reading if you like them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
All the best.
Same to you. Bye-bye.